the UN should take the lead to mobilize international support to fight Ebola, which is an evident danger not only to West Africa, but to the world at large. On this note, we want to thank the Russian Federation for being one of the first major powers to respond to this outbreak of deadly Ebola by providing scientific or medical teams to some of these countries as soon as the outbreak was announced. Mr. President, secondly, for some time now, the world has been witnessing the bloodiest and most heinous forms of terrorism unleashed by these satanic and sadistic human vermin disguised as Islamic militants, ostensibly in the name of Islamic purity. But in reality, these sons of infamy and their shameless and deceitful claims of devotion to the peaceful and noble religion of Islam are in fact an insult to not only all true Muslims, but to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and humanity in general. Mr. President, before the emergence of Mujahideen in Iran and later in Afghanistan in the 1980s, a movement subsequently associated to Islamic terrorism by Western mainstream media in total disregard for its creation and sponsorship by Western powers to fight proxy wars against the Islamic Revolution in Iran and the Soviets in Afghanistan on their behalf, there existed no Islamic terrorism before then. Islam, in its entire history, has never been associated with violence or terrorism, as these activities are haram for a Muslim. Islam is a religion of peace and tolerance and has nothing to do with the activities of these anti-Islamic bands of dangerous criminals who spread nothing but deep-seated hatred for human life and whose sole intention is to desecrate and defame Islam. Consequently, these serial and treacherous hate groups cannot be associated to Islam, as our Islamic religion is pure and unique, cannot therefore be classified into any varying degrees like moderate Islam, democratic Islam, extreme Islam, or violent Islam. Simply put, Islam is a pure religion that encourages the best of human behavior and interpersonal relationship amongst other virtues, as prescribed by the Almighty Allah, the Creator. In other words, the adherents of this lunatic fringe of bandits and gangsters like Boko Haram, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, etc., are dangerous criminals and enemies of human civilization and development, and should therefore be wiped out from the face of this earth because we don't need them. Thirdly, Mr. President, the situation in the Middle East remains highly volatile, and the UN has been watching the cycle of violence in the region rather helplessly. In the most recent conflict between the Palestinians and Israelis, about more than 2,000 people from Gaza, mostly women and children, died at the hands of the Israeli army, and about 70 Israelis, all of them soldiers except for 3 children, lost their lives. Despite repeated calls for restraint by the international community, the continuing expansion of Israeli settlements on Palestinian land is unacceptable, and as it undermines any prospect for a two-state solution. The US government has been playing very strategic and useful mediating role in the past, but the UN now must take up its commanding role in seeking a peaceful settlement that is just and durable and acceptable to all the members of the United Nations. Fourthly, as part of its core mandate in promoting global peace and security, and greater understanding among peoples of different backgrounds and cultures, the UN must do more to advocate a culture of peace and tolerance and understanding not only among the world's great religions, but also among member states themselves. This is important as we continue to witness growing propagation of disinformation and misrepresentation, especially by the Western media, about Islam in general and the application of the Sharia law, particularly in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the birthplace of Islam, and Sharia is the legal system in Islam, and it is the only divine constitution of not only the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, but all Islamic states. Therefore, the incessant criticisms and misrepresentations about the application of Sharia law in Saudi Arabia or anywhere else is disrespectful and therefore abhorrent. It is an insult to all true Muslims to describe Sharia law as barbaric. As a matter of fact, the most barbaric laws are those that are not based on any divine teachings. Sharia is the legal system that the Almighty Allah has prescribed for all Muslims, and we will apply to the letter. Mr. President, in the same vein, the UN General Assembly should be commended for the passage 2 years ago of the World Interfaith Harmony Week, urging member states to designate the first week of February each year as the Interfaith Week, when the messages of goodwill and tolerance are spread through mosques, churches, and other places of worship. While this was a good beginning for promoting peace and harmony among religions and peoples of different belief systems, the UN must do more to match the continuing attacks on Islam in particular by people who do not even believe in the existence of a supreme creator called the Almighty Allah. These infidels have no moral high ground to describe any religion because they don't believe in God, and religion belongs to God. More so, to say anything about a religion as pure, authentic, and noble as Islam. Mr. President, finally, the United Nations must play its central role in addressing the injustices associated with the unilateral, bilateral application of economic and financial sanctions by one member state against another as a coercive tool of foreign policy, because it contravenes the fundamental principles of international law, humanitarian law, and the principles and norms governing peaceful coexistence among sovereign states. In this regard, the Gambia calls on the United States of America's government to unconditionally end the long-standing U.S. embargo on Cuba that has brought about untold hardship on the Cuban people. It's indeed ironic that the same power talking today about respecting Ukrainian sovereignty and freedom to choose their own way of life is the same power that has maintained unjustifiable collective punishment on Cuba and Cuban people for almost 5 decades, thereby devastating their economy because, like the Ukrainians today, the Cubans decades ago opted for a system of governance of their choice. Mr. President, that brings me to climate change. Climate change and development are inextricably linked. The impact of climate change is felt in all countries, particularly developing countries, as it undermines their ability to achieve sustainable development. While Africa is not responsible for the pollution and the factors causing climate change, it stands to suffer the most, with 96% of Africa's agriculture being dependent on rainfall, and 50% of fisheries-related jobs estimated to be lost by 2050, climate change poses dire consequences to livelihoods in Africa. The Gambia family believes that mitigating the adverse effect of climate change calls for a timely and decisive global response. It is a challenge that should unite us, not divide us. In this regard, the Gambia joins other countries affected by climate change and like-minded groups in urging developed countries that are parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, to fully implement their commitments under the Kyoto Protocol. Mr. President, in 1974, this Assembly adopted the Declaration for the Establishment of the New International Economic Order, NIEO, which was designed to address some legitimate concerns of developing countries, such as improving their terms of trade and other issues related to the promotion of a more equitable international economic system. Many of the political, economic, and social issues that inspired the new international economic order still remain unanswered 4 decades after that historic declaration. Mr. President, as the post-2015 agenda attracts our attention today, we must not relegate those old concerns of developing countries to the dustbin of history. In a nutshell, their old concerns, as well as their new aspirations, must no longer be relegated. To that end, the foundation of any transformative agenda should logically begin with genuine reform of the institutions of global governance, particularly the United Nations systems. Given the current membership of the United Nations Security Council, the reform of this important organ of the world body is long overdue. We African leaders have for a very long time been calling attention to restoring the effectiveness and the legitimacy of the UN by allocating 2 permanent seats with full veto powers, as well as 2 non-permanent seats on the Security Council to reflect current geopolitical realities. Mr. President, if the demands for the reform of the Security Council in the interest of equity and justice cannot be accommodated, then concrete action must be taken for the General Assembly to assume all the powers of the Security Council and its responsibilities, including the power to impose sanctions. Under this arrangement, all decisions of the UNGA would have been voted for by all members and endorsed by the majority of its membership, thus ensuring a more democratic and transparent global body called the UN. Mr. President, on a final note, I want to call the attention of the UN General Assembly and the Security Council to the very frequent and mysterious sinking, capsizing, etc., of boats carrying mostly black African migrants looking for greener pastures in the West, only to end up in body bags on European shores. Strangely enough, those countries that pretend to love Africans so much that they are always preaching to African leaders about good governance, the rule of law, and respect for human life and rights, have been apparently eerily quiet about the very dangerous, racist, and inhuman behavior of deliberately causing boats carrying black Africans to sink, only to select a few lucky ones to be rescued and sent to concentration camps called asylum seekers camps. These camps are as bad as Nazi concentration camps, and nobody, country or or human rights institution in the West has ever raised the alarm to this genocide in the 21st century. Mr. President, if earlier Africans that received the European explorers before colonialism treated them the same way, Africa would not have been colonized for 400 years. The so-called European explorers were nothing short of people seeking greener pastures for their fellow Europeans, as Europe then had turned into brown pasture. After 400 years of colonial looting and misrule in Africa, Africa is reduced from green now to brown pasture due to overgrazing. Now, African explorers are not only unwelcome, but are greeted with instant death on European soils. This is unacceptable. Therefore, Mr. President, the UN must conduct a full and impartial investigation into this man-made catastrophe, that is the sinking, capsizing of these boats carrying young Africans to Europe. If these boats are able to cross the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea only to sink on European coasts, we must find out what deadly mysterious force exists on the European Mediterranean coast that caused boats carrying young Africans to disintegrate and sink upon arrival. Mr. President, racism, greed, and hate can only breed hatred, violence, and disastrous confrontation between races. We African leaders would stand up together, I hope, to protect these young Africans from mass murder on European coasts. I hereby call on the UN to commission such an investigation as a matter of priority and urgency in order to avert a major racial confrontation. We have a right as Africans to defend our black people wherever they are. As we welcome all races to Africa, we will not accept that Africans are treated like dogs and they get away with it. That is unacceptable. If the UN fails to take action, we will take action. And the action we take will be determined by us. In the Gambia, we don't attack a person because you are white or black or because of your religion. No foreigner in the Gambia will say, I was attacked because I'm a foreigner. Any foreigner that comes into contact with the police is because he has committed an offense for which even a Gambian would be arrested. If we cannot tolerate each other, the world will never see peace. Because nobody can stop migration. The Almighty Allah created this world for us to move around. The same way you moved around when Europe was bankrupt. You came to Africa for 400 years. We never killed you. You overstayed, and some of us have to fight you out. And now you have overgrazed our land. You also want greener pastures. You cannot accept us. Send us back, but don't kill them. You have no right to kill them. Mr. President, for the Gambia, out of hundreds of European explorers that came to the Gambia in those days, only one European died on the river Gambia over a span of 400 years. Today, over a span of 5 years period, more than 500 Gambians have lost their lives on European coasts. This is unacceptable. Enough is enough, and the UN must intervene, and intervene quickly, or else we will all live to regret our failure to take appropriate action at the right time. Mr. President, geopolitical realities have changed. Let the West accept these realities, and together with us, endeavor to change along with these realities as we move together towards the brighter and peaceful future we want. So-called military superpowers should know that humanity would be returned to pre-Stone Age if they are reckless enough to unleash World War III. Mr. President, you cannot have your cake and eat it anyhow you please, and at the same time dictate to others how, when, and where they should eat their cake. In the 21st century, humanity needs only superpowers of peace and development, and not the medieval Europe type of warmongers. We can't accept. Why can't we accept the diversity of the human race and its attendant diversity in culture, religion, and way of life as each diverse group deems fit? I thank you for your attention.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of the Gambia for the statement made. May I request the representative to remain seated while we greet the President. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Bronisław Komorowski, President of the Republic of Poland. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Bronisław Komorowski, President of the Republic of Poland, and to invite him to address the Assembly. Mr. President.
Szanowny Panie Przewodniczący, dostojni delegaci. Przede wszystkim pragnę najpierw pogratulować Panu Ministrowi Samowi Kutesie wyboru na zaszczytną funkcję Przewodniczącego sesji. Panie Przewodniczący, drodzy delegaci, w pierwszych zdaniach naszej karty mówi się, że Narody Zjednoczone powstały po to, aby uchronić przyszłe pokolenia od klęski wojny, aby przywrócić wiarę w podstawowe prawa człowieka oraz równość narodów wielkich i małych. W roku 100. rocznicy wybuchu I wojny światowej i 75. rocznicy wybuchu II przesłanie tych słów jest szczególnie doniosłe dla nas, dla Polaków, dla Europejczyków, ale i dla wszystkich społeczeństw dotkniętych tymi tragediami wojny. Obie wojny toczyły się na terytorium Polski, a II wojna światowa II wojnę światową rozpoczęła agresja hitlerowskich Niemiec współpracujących ze Związkiem Sowieckim. Nasza przeszłość zobowiązuje nas, by refleksja nad tymi słowami karty i nad tymi wydarzeniami w XX-wiecznej historii towarzyszyła zarówno podejmowaniu decyzji na szczeblu krajowym, jak i zobowiązywała całą społeczność międzynarodową zorganizowaną w Narodach Zjednoczonych. Pierwsza wojna światowa umocniła marzenie o świecie bez wojen. Owocem tego przeświadczenia i tej powszechnej woli była Liga Narodów. Pierwszy w historii ludzkości system bezpieczeństwa zbiorowego. Miał wszystkie dane po temu, aby dobrze zapisać się w historii, aby utrzymać pokój i bezpieczeństwo. Jego funkcjonowanie oparte było na ważnych regułach zakazów wojny oraz nakazu pokojowego rozwiązywania sporów. Liga miała wspólne organy, konferencje rozbrojeniowe i sądownictwo międzynarodowe. Mimo tych wszystkich instytucji nie udało się jednak stworzyć świata bez wojen. Liga Narodów stała się później przedmiotem łatwej krytyki, wręcz szyderstw. Jednak to nie ona zawiodła. Zawiedli jej członkowie, przede wszystkim mocarstwa, którym powierzono szczególną odpowiedzialność za realizację jej głównego zadania. Ówczesne mocarstwa nie zdały egzaminu wobec ekspansji lewicowych i prawicowych totalitaryzmów. Udział w pojawieniu się komunizmu i narodowego socjalizmu oraz wielu militarystycznych dyktatur miała I wojna światowa. Te systemy z kolei żywiły się konfliktem, bowiem wojna ideologiczna, wojna przeciwko innym narodom, wojna przeciwko innemu człowiekowi była częścią ich tożsamości. Te zagrożenia mogły być powstrzymane na czas, ale demokratyczny świat zawiódł. Zawiódł, wybierając krótkowzroczną politykę epismentu oraz zaspokajania apetytów dyktatur kosztem państw słabszych. Ceną za te zaniechania była II wojna światowa, a tę niewyobrażalną wcześniej cenę musieli zapłacić wszyscy. Musiała zapłacić cała ludzkość. Ze straszliwego doświadczenia tamtej wojny, doświadczenia zagłady, zrodziło się prawne pojęcie ludobójstwa. Jego autorem oraz autorem samej konwencji przeciwko ludobójstwu był prawnik polski Rafał Lemkin, który już przed II wojną światową przeczuwał zbrodniczą naturę obu totalitaryzmów. Po hekatombie wojny społeczność międzynarodowa postanowiła jeszcze raz spróbować stworzyć system bezpieczeństwa zbiorowego. Cieszę się, że w przyszłym roku będziemy obchodzić 70. rocznicę utworzenia Narodów Zjednoczonych. Już bardzo niewielu pamięta świat bez naszej organizacji i trudno wyobrazić sobie świat bez jej działania. W ciągu już niemal 7 dekad istnienia Narodów Zjednoczonych narody te zanotowały piękne karty, ale też liczne niepowodzenia. Jednak dzisiaj sytuacja jest szczególnie niepokojąca, bowiem pojawiają się symptomy zjawisk, które doprowadziły kiedyś do upadku Ligi Narodów. Dzisiaj znajdujemy się w obliczu renesansu postaw mocarstwowych, powrotu myślenia w kategoriach geopolitycznych stref wpływów, które już raz zawiodły społeczność międzynarodową na manowce nienawiści, konfrontacji i konfliktu. Narody Zjednoczone powinny zachować więc czujność wobec recydywy takich postaw. Nie powinny tolerować odchodzenia od uzgodnionych w karcie zasad bezpieczeństwa i stosunków międzynarodowych. Tolerancja dla takich postaw zawsze źle się kończy. Nierzadko prowadzi wprost do katastrofy. Panie Przewodniczący, Szanowni Państwo, z całą mocą trzeba podkreślić, że okupacja Krymu i agresja na Ukrainie stanowi złamanie norm prawa międzynarodowego i podeptanie fundamentalnych wartości Narodów Zjednoczonych. Ideowym tłem tego konfliktu jest nawrót retoryki z pierwszej połowy poprzedniego stulecia, nawrót do logiki stref wpływów, logiki prawa silniejszego oraz bezwzględnej imperialnej dominacji nad słabszymi sąsiadami. Dominacji nad sąsiadami, którzy mają rzekomo obowiązek być posłusznymi satelitami mocarstwa dokonującego rewizji podstaw cywilizowanego porządku międzynarodowego. Rada Bezpieczeństwa, organ odpowiedzialny za pokój, okazała się mało skuteczna w obliczu konfliktów na Ukrainie i w innych regionach świata, także ze względu na reguły jej działania. Bez korekty tych reguł grozi nam dalsze pogrążanie się w niemocy. To dobrze, że Zgromadzenie Ogólne stanęło na wysokości zadania i w rezolucji nr 68/262 z 27 marca 2014 roku stanęło po stronie słabszego, będącego celem imperialnej agresji. Panie Przewodniczący, Szanowni Delegaci, powyższe słowa wypowiadam z tym większym smutkiem i niepokojem, że właśnie obchodzimy w Polsce i w innych krajach naszego regionu Europy 25. radosną rocznicę obalenia komunizmu oraz rozpadu bloku sowieckiego. Ta druga w historii Europy wiosna ludów przyniosła narodom Europy Środkowo-Wschodniej wolność, poszanowanie praw człowieka oraz zasad dobrego, demokratycznego rządzenia. Zmiany na lepsze nastąpiły wtedy w całej Europie, a nawet w całym świecie. Upadła żelazna kurtyna oraz bipolarny podział świata. Odeszła w przeszłość zimnowojenna konfrontacja z towarzyszącą jej groźbą konfliktu nuklearnego. Ta historyczna zmiana zaczęła się w Polsce od powstania 10-milionowego ruchu społecznego Solidarność, ruchu pokojowego sprzeciwu oraz totalitarnego ucisku oraz protestu przeciwko gwałceniu praw narodu. Zwycięskie wybory parlamentarne 4 czerwca doprowadziły do powstania 12 września 1989 roku pierwszego niekomunistycznego rządu w naszej części Europy po całym długim okresie powojennym. Był to rząd Tadeusza Mazowieckiego. I już 2 tygodnie później, 25 września, równo 25 lat temu, minister spraw zagranicznych tego nowego rządu, profesor Krzysztof Skubiszewski, ogłosił z tej trybuny delegatom na sesję Zgromadzenia Ogólnego Narodów Zjednoczonych, że nowa Polska nie będzie respektować logiki stref wpływów. Zapowiedział, że będziemy respektować istniejące układy i zobowiązania, że będziemy respektować interesy bezpieczeństwa innych państw, ale nie mogą one oznaczać jakichkolwiek ograniczeń co do wyboru lub zmiany systemu ustrojowego. Ta nowa logika stosunków międzynarodowych przyniosła wiele dobra w Europie. W Europie, w której doszło do wielkiej fali zjednoczenia za sprawą pogłębienia mechanizmów integracyjnych i rozszerzenia się wspólnot europejskich na wiele nowych państw. Unia Europejska jest w naszym regionie synonimem pokoju. Powstała po to, aby na kontynencie słynącym wcześniej z wojen już nigdy do nich nie dochodziło. I rzeczywiście, Unia Europejska stała się istotnym gwarantem pokoju w Europie i daleko poza europejskimi granicami. Polska aktywnie włączyła się w tę działalność. Mieliśmy więc prawo mieć nadzieję, że dobrodziejstwo końca podziału w Europie i końca logiki imperialnych stref wpływów będzie mogło być udziałem coraz większej liczby państw i narodów, nie tylko w Europie, że będą one mogły demokratycznie decydować o swoim losie i wolne od zewnętrznej dominacji budować swoje życie w pokoju i w dobrobycie. Mieliśmy i mamy nadzieję na demokratyczną modernizację Rosji. Ale to, co stało się w Europie Wschodniej pół roku temu, zadało cios tej nadziei, zagroziło bezpieczeństwu na naszym europejskim kontynencie. W naszej części Europy ludzie znowu zadają sobie pytanie, czy wojna jako metoda osiągania celów politycznych na długo będzie rzeczywistością także i w Europie. Nie możemy zgadzać się na brutalizację życia międzynarodowego. Nie możemy zgadzać się bez względu na to, gdzie to ma miejsce. Tym bardziej nie możemy się zgadzać w Europie, na kontynencie jeszcze do tej pory leczącym rany po 2 wojnach światowych. A przecież i w innych częściach naszego świata, naszego globu także trwają wojny i konflikty, które pociągają za sobą niezliczone ofiary, cierpienie i zniszczenie. Wszyscy zostaliśmy zaskoczeni szybkością, z jaką rozwinęło się tak zwane islamskie państwo Iraku i Lewantu. Brutalność postępowania jego bojowników, mordowanie i prześladowanie wszystkich inaczej wierzących, także, co trzeba podkreślić, także wyznawców islamu, musi przerażać i musi mobilizować do przeciwdziałania. To barbarzyństwo stanowi wyzwanie dla całej ludzkości, niezależnie od wyznania, od przynależności etnicznej czy od poglądów politycznych. My, państwa wierne Karcie Narodów Zjednoczonych, nie możemy się uchylać od odpowiedzialności za zapewnienie bezpieczeństwa. Jesteśmy odpowiedzialni za to, by chronić zagrożonych okrutną przemocą, ale trzeba to robić to wszystko, by działając jednocześnie na gruncie Karty Narodów Zjednoczonych. Wyrażamy więc nasz niepokój i ból z powodu konfliktów i dramatów ludności cywilnej w Syrii, Libii, w Izraelu, w Strefie Gazy oraz w wielu państwach Afryki. Wszystkim tym konfliktom, a w jeszcze większym stopniu wojnom domowym w niektórych krajach Afryki towarzyszą katastrofy humanitarne. Narody Zjednoczone, a zwłaszcza mocarstwa posiadające wpływ na uczestniczące w nich strony, powinny zrobić wszystko,
All right, one last podium check. Make sure you're okay. Give me a thumbs up when you are. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, got the thumbs up. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Happy? Give me a sec.
You should see us on 502 what do you want? Bars in town for a minute? Bars, please. Drop loose the bars. No, we're going to be on White House. It's okay. Yeah, ask her to talk to Christina. She's anxiously waiting to hear from him. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
One, two, 1, 2. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I'd like to ask you to turn off your cell phones. Turn off your cell phones. Thank you. One, two. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your 2-minute warning. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and Attorney General Eric Holder.
Hello, everybody. Please have a seat. Bobby Kennedy once said, "On this generation of Americans falls the full burden of proving to the world that we really mean it when we say all men are created free and equal before the law." As one of the longest-serving attorney generals in American history, Eric Holder has borne that burden. And over the summer, he came to me and he said he thought 6 years was a pretty good run. I imagine his family agrees. Like me, Eric married up. He and his wife, Dr. Sharon Malone, a nationally renowned OB-GYN, have been great friends to Michelle and me for years. And I know Brooke and Maya and Buddy are excited to get their dad back for a while. So this is bittersweet. But with his typical dedication, Eric has agreed to stay on as Attorney General until I nominate a successor. And that successor is confirmed by the Senate, which means he'll have a chance to add to a proud career of public service, one that began nearly 40 years ago as a young prosecutor in the department that he now runs. He was there for 12 years, taking on political corruption until President Reagan named him to the bench as a judge. Later, President Clinton called him back. So all told, Eric has served at the Justice Department under 6 presidents of both parties, including a several-day stint as acting Attorney General at the start of George W. Bush's first term. And through it all, he's shown a deep and abiding fidelity to one of our most cherished ideals as a people, and that is equal justice under the law. As younger men, Eric and I both studied law, and I chose him to serve as Attorney General because he believes, as I do, that justice is not just an abstract theory. It's a living and breathing principle. It's about how our laws interact with our daily lives. It's about whether we can make an honest living, whether we can provide for our families, whether we feel safe in our own communities and welcomed in our own country, whether the words that the founders set to paper 238 years ago apply to every single one of us, and not just some. That's why I made him America's lawyer, the people's lawyer. That comes with a big portfolio, from counterterrorism to civil rights, public corruption to white-collar crime, and alongside the incredible men and women of the Justice Department, men and women that I promise you he is proud of and will deeply miss, Eric has done a superb job. He's worked side by side with our intelligence community and the Department of Homeland Security to keep us safe from terrorist attacks and to counter violent extremism. On his watch, federal courts have successfully prosecuted hundreds of terror cases, proving that the world's finest justice system is fully capable of delivering justice for the world's most wanted terrorists. He's rooted out corruption and fought violent crime. Under his watch, a few years ago, the FBI successfully carried out the largest mafia takedown in American history. He's worked closely with state and local law enforcement officers to make sure that they've got the resources to get the job done. And he's managed funds under the Recovery Act to make sure that when budgets took a hit, thousands of cops were able to stay on the beat nationwide. He's helped safeguard our markets from manipulation and consumers from financial fraud. Since 2009, the Justice Department has brought more than 60 cases against financial institutions and won some of the largest settlements in history for practices related to the financial crisis, recovering $85 billion, much of it returned to ordinary Americans who were badly hurt. He's worked passionately to make sure our criminal justice system remains the best in the world. He knows that too many outdated policies, no matter how well-intentioned, perpetuate a destructive cycle in too many communities. So Eric addressed unfair sentencing disparities, reworked mandatory minimums, and promoted alternatives to incarceration. And thanks to his efforts, since I took office, the overall crime rate and the overall incarceration rate have gone down by about 10%. That's the first time that they've declined together at the same time in more than 40 years. Eric's proudest achievement, though, might be reinvigorating and restoring the core mission to what he calls the conscience of the building, and that's the Civil Rights Division. He has been relentless against attacks on the Voting Rights Act, because no citizen, including our service members, should have to jump through hoops to exercise their most fundamental right. He's challenged discriminatory state immigration laws that not only risked harassment of citizens and legal immigrants, but actually made it harder for law enforcement to do its job. Under his watch, the department has brought a record number of prosecutions for human trafficking and for hate crimes, because no one in America should be afraid to walk down the street because of the color of their skin, the love in their heart, the faith they practice, or the disabilities that they live with. He's dramatically advanced the cause of justice for Native Americans, working closely with their communities. And several years ago, he recommended that our government stop defending the Defense of Marriage Act, a decision that was vindicated by the Supreme Court and opened the door to federal recognition of same-sex marriage and federal benefits for same-sex couples. It's a pretty good track record. Eric's father was an immigrant who served in the Army in World War II, only to be refused service at lunch counters in the nation he defended. But he and his wife raised their son to believe that this country's promise was real. And that son grew up to become Attorney General of the United States. And that's something. And that's why Eric's worked so hard, not just in my administration, but for decades, to open up the promise of this country to more striving, dreaming kids like him, to make sure that those words, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, are made real for all of us. So soon, Eric, Sharon, and their kids will be a bit freer to pursue a little more happiness of their own, and thanks to Eric's efforts, so will more Americans, regardless of race or religion, gender or creed, sexual orientation, or disability, who will receive fair and equal treatment under the law. So I just want to say thank you, Eric. Thank you to the men and the women of the Justice Department who work day in and out for the American people, and we could not be more grateful for everything that you've done, not just for me and the administration, but for our country.
I come to this moment with very mixed emotions. Proud of what the men and women of the Department of Justice have accomplished over the last 6 years, and at the same time, very sad that I will not be a formal part of the great things that this department and this president will accomplish over the next 2. I want to thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity that you gave me to serve and for giving me the greatest honor of my professional life. We have been great colleagues, but the bonds between us are much deeper than that. In good times and in bad, in things personal and in things professional, you have been there for me. I'm proud to call you my friend. I'm also grateful for the support you have given me and the department as we have made real the visions that you and I have always shared. I often think of those early talks between us about our belief that we might help to craft a more perfect union. Now, work remains to be done, but our list of accomplishments is real. Over the last 6 years, our administration, your administration, has made historic gains in realizing the principles of the founding documents and fought to protect the most sacred of American rights, the right to vote. We have begun to realize the promise of equality for our LGBT brothers and sisters and their families. We have begun to significantly reform our criminal justice system and reconnect those who bravely serve in law enforcement with the communities that they protect. We have kept faith with our belief in the power of the greatest judicial system the world has ever known to fairly and effectively adjudicate any cases that are brought before it, including those that involve the security of the nation that we both love so dearly. We have taken steps to protect the environment and make more fair the rules by which our commercial enterprises operate. And we have held accountable those who would harm the American people either through violent means or the misuse of economic or political power. I have loved the Department of Justice ever since, as a young boy, I watched Robert Kennedy prove during the Civil Rights Movement how the department can and must always be a force for that which is right. I hope that I have done honor to the faith that you have placed in me, Mr. President, and to the legacy of all those who have served before me. I would also like to thank the Vice President, who I have known for so many years and in whom I have found great wisdom, unwavering support, and a shared vision of what America can and should be. I want to recognize my good friend, Valerie Jarrett, whom I've been fortunate to work with from the beginning of what started as an improbable, idealistic effort by a young senator from Illinois, who we were both right to believe would achieve greatness. I've had the opportunity to serve in your distinguished cabinet and worked with a White House staff ably led by Dennis McDonough, that has done much to make real the promise of our democracy. And each of the men and women who I have come to know will be lifelong friends. Whatever my accomplishments, they could not have been achieved without the love, support, and guidance of two people who are not here with me today. My parents, Eric and Miriam Holder, nurtured me and my accomplished brother William, and made us believe in the value of individual effort and the greatness of this nation. My time in public service, which now comes to an end, would not have been possible without the sacrifices, too often unfair, made by the best three kids a father could ask for. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Brooke. And thank you, Buddy. And finally, I want to thank the woman who sacrificed the most and allowed me to follow my dreams. She's the foundation of all that our family is and the basis of all that I have become. My wife, Sharon, is the unsung hero, and she is my life partner. Thank you for all that you have done. I love you. In the months ahead, I will leave the Department of Justice, but I will never leave the work. I will continue to serve and try to find ways to make our nation even more true to its founding ideals. I want to thank the dedicated public servants who form the backbone of the United States Department of Justice for their tireless work over the past 6 years, for the efforts they will continue, and for the progress that they made and that will outlast us all. And I want to thank you all for joining me on a journey that now moves in another direction, but that will always be guided by the pursuit of justice and aimed at the North Star. Thank you.
You got through it.